The Subcommittee on Higher Education and Workforce Investment will come to order. Welcome, everyone. I note that a quorum is present. I note for the subcommittee that Mr. Mervyn of Indiana is permitted to participate in today's hearing with the understanding that his questions will come only after all members of the Subcommittee on Higher Education and Workforce Investment on both sides of the aisle who are present have had an opportunity to question the witnesses. The subcommittee is meeting today to hear testimony on workforce innovation and opportunity and the Workforce and Opportunity Act reauthorization, creating employment pathways for dislocated workers. This is an entirely remote hearing. All microphones will be kept muted as a general rule to avoid unnecessary background noise. Members and witnesses will be responsible for unmuting themselves when they are recognized to speak or when they wish to seek recognition. I also ask that members please identify themselves before they speak. Members should keep their cameras on while in the proceeding. Members shall be considered present in the proceedings when they are visible on camera, and they shall be considered not present when they are not visible on camera. The only exception if they are experiencing difficulties technically and inform committee staff of such difficulty. If any member experiences technical difficulties during the hearing, you should stay connected on the platform. Make sure you are muted and use your phone to immediately call the committee. Call the committee's IT director. You have been given that number in advance. Should the chair experience technical difficulty or need to stop to leave or step away to vote on the floor, Mr. Takano or another majority member is hereby authorized to assume the gavel in the chair's absence. This is an entirely remote hearing, and as such, the committee's hearing room is officially closed. Members who choose to sit with their individual devices in the hearing room must wear headphones to avoid feedback, echoes, and distortion resulting from more than one person on the software platform sitting in the same room. Members are also expected to adhere to social distancing and safe health care guidelines, including the use of masks, hand sanitizer, and wiping down their areas both before and after their presence in the hearing room. In order to ensure that the committee's 5-minute rule is adhered to, staff will be keeping track of time using the committee's field timer. The field timer will appear on its own thumbnail picture and will be named 00_timer. There will be no 1 minute remaining warning. The field timer will show a blinking light when time is up. Members and witnesses are asked to wrap up promptly when their time has expired. While a roll call is not necessary to establish a quorum in official proceedings conducted remotely or with remote participation, the committee has made it a practice whenever there is an official proceeding with remote participation for the clerk to call the roll to help make clear who is present at the start of the proceeding. Members should say their name before announcing they are present. This helps the clerk and also helps those watching the platform and the live stream who may experience a few seconds delay. At this time, I ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Chairwoman Wilson.
Congresswoman Wilson is present.
Mr. Takano. Ms. Jayapal,
Jayapal is present.
Ms. Omar, Ms. Leger Fernandez,
Leger Fernandez is present.
Mr. Jones, Ms. Manning,
Yes,
Mr. Bowman,
I'm calling the roll right now.
Mr. Bowman is present.
Mr. Pocan,
Mr. O'Kan is present.
Mr. Castro, Ms. Cheryl, Mr. Espaillat, Mr. Grijalva,
Grijalva present.
Mr. Courtney,
Courtney present.
Ms. Bonamici,
Suzanne Bonamici is present.
Mr. Scott,
Scott's present.
Ranking Member Murphy, Mr. Grossman,
Present.
Ms. Stefanik, Mr. Banks, Mr. Comer, Mr. Fulcher, Mrs. Miller Meeks, Mr. Good,
Good here.
Mrs. McLean, Mrs. Hirschberger, Mrs. Sparts,
Art is present.
Ms. Letlow, Ranking Member Fox.
Fox is here.
Chairwoman Wilson, that concludes the roll call.
Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, how is Jones recorded?
Mr. Jones, I've marked you as present.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, how is Takano recorded?
Mr. Takano, you are present as well.
Thank you.
So everyone has been recorded. Thank you. Thank you so much. Pursuant to Committee Rule 8C, opening statements are limited to the chair and the ranking member. This allows us to hear from our witnesses sooner and provides all members with adequate time to ask questions. I now recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. Today, we meet for our second bipartisan hearing on reauthorizing the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WOIA. This hearing will address key priorities to support workers who have been forced out of their jobs and to help workers avoid future displacement through lifelong learning. WOIA supports an array of programs that provide displaced workers with the skills and support they need to attain higher paying and more rewarding careers. These include career services ranging from career planning and counseling to supportive services, including need-based payments. We also provides workers with access to training services, including on-the-job training, which allows workers to earn while they train. That is so important. And have individual training accounts or ITAs, which workers can use on approved in-state training programs. There is no better time to strengthen critical initiatives that help displaced workers get back on their feet, particularly as millions of workers remain unemployed or underemployed due to the pandemic. Worse, too many of the jobs lost during the pandemic will not be coming back. Yet since well before COVID-19, Congress has underfunded workforce development programs under WOIA. making their services largely unavailable to the workers and businesses they are intended to serve. Over the last decade, federal funding for workforce systems has decreased by nearly 20% adjusted for inflation. WIA's core dislocated worker program specifically received appropriated funding below authorized levels by a combined $500 million between fiscal years 2016 and 2020. As a nation, we have repeatedly failed to sufficiently invest in workforce infrastructure. The United States currently spends only about 0.1% of its gross domestic product on workforce policy, compared to an average of 0.6% in other developed nations. In fact, in the last program year, only around 30% of people who interacted with the public workforce system were actually able to access training because of the lack of funding. This chronic underfunding is a significant barrier to preparing workers to remain competitive in the global economy. It is also particularly frustrating given WIA's program's long record of helping employers and displaced workers overcome the challenges they currently face. For example, a 2017 study found that individualized career services under WIA included individualized employment plans and counseling, increased earnings for workers by up to 20% over a 30-month period. And in 2019, WIA's displaced workers program served more than 250,000 people, with more than 70% of those workers employed 1 year after they left. However, we should aim higher than just adequately funding WIA to respond to workers' displacement. We must also take proactive steps to prevent workers from being displaced in the first place. Today, with the help of our expert witnesses, we will discuss how we can expand access to the lifelong learning and career navigation support that workers need in this changing economy, ever-changing economy. These steps include expanding program eligibility to ensure more workers can access the full range of benefits and supportive services. Currently, workers displaced by trade receive comprehensive support under the Trade Adjustment Assistance Act, but workers displaced for other reasons have access to a far more limited range of services under WIA. We can also expand other career services and better track and demand skills and competencies for workers to upgrade their skills. This will enable more workers to rejoin or stay connected to the workforce at a time when businesses need talented employees. The importance of this effort to strengthen WIA is best understood through the real-life success stories. Let me give you one. Take, for instance, Wendy, an Idaho resident who was laid off from her job as a sales representative when she earned $21 an hour and benefits. After several unsuccessful interviews, she had a temporary part-time and on-call retail position at Walmart paying $9 an hour with no benefits. Here was Wendy, an unemployed worker over the age of 50, who was feeling discouraged and doubtful that she could compete in the modern economy. With support from WIA-funded programs, she enrolled in a training program that helped actually turn her life around. After completing the program, she was hired for an upper management job with Walmart's home office, while making $25 an hour with benefits. This success story can be replicated for millions of workers if we simply commit to funding and strengthening WOIA. Today, we will discuss how we can help displaced workers forge a pathway forward while also preparing them with the lifelong education and training to navigate our changing economy. I now recognize the distinguished ranking member of the full Committee on Education and Labor, Dr. Fox, for the purpose of making an opening statement. Dr. Fox.
Thank you, Chairwoman Wilson. I appreciate that. The skills gap is a growing concern for all sectors of the American economy, and it impacts businesses and workers alike. In February of this year, McKinsey's study estimated that 45 million Americans, that's a quarter of our workforce, will lose their jobs due to automation by the year 2030. Perhaps more concerning is the study's second conclusion. Only 17% of those employees are likely to find new work, leaving an estimated and unprecedented 39 million Americans jobless. And the pandemic threatens to exacerbate this troubling trend. We know that during economic recessions, companies turn to machines and automation as an alternative to human labor. However, even with increased automation, businesses across the country still have open jobs, but are hampered by a lack of skilled workers. This is not an abstract concern. Even before COVID-19, 7 million jobs were unfilled due to the skills gap. Wayne Gretzky was the greatest hockey player ever, and he once observed, he never wanted to skate to where the puck was, but where it was going to be. The same is true in workforce development. If our workforce system focuses on today's jobs only, then we won't be equipped for the economy of the future, which is why we're here today, to learn from folks on the ground. What is working? What isn't? How can we get out of your way to expand upon the innovation that business is already leading? By battling this problem now, we can remove bureaucratic barriers to help millions find employment opportunities today, and nearly a quarter of Americans avoid dislocation and unemployment in the future. I listened to the chairwoman when she was talking about having a 70% placement rate in some of the workforce development programs that currently exist and people working in those jobs a year later. She's a former educator. And I know she would agree with me, 70% is not a passing grade. And we can do better. If we have only 70% of the people in jobs 1 year after they go through a program that we've spent billions of dollars on, something's not working right. And we need to work on that. And perhaps it is looking toward where that puck is going to be, not where it currently is. As we consider a reauthorization of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and incidentally, for those of you who weren't around, when we passed that bill and President Obama signed it, when we passed it out of the House, it was called the Skills Act. I think we were very prescient in calling the bill the Skills Act then. But when it passed the House, that's what it was called. And the Senate insisted on changing the title to Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which is a mouthful. We should have called it the Skills Act. But we acceded to their wanting to change it because we wanted to get the bill passed. But as we consider the reauthorization, our primary goal and focus should be creating additional pathways for workers to reskill and upskill to meet the demands of our evolving 21st century economy. I am very encouraged by the Democrats' commitment to examine this reauthorization thoroughly, and I'm hopeful we will come to a solution that works not just for politicians, but for the people who have everything to gain from these vital job-saving efforts. And the word I keep coming back to when discussing WOIA programs is in the hearing title, pathways. Congress creates pathways when we remove unnecessary barriers and offer services that help workers build skills that lead to lasting successful employment and self-sufficiently. Most importantly, these pathways must be responsive to the needs of business and industry. A workforce system that does not provide workers with in-demand skills for the region is a poor use of taxpayer dollars and could handicap our nation's economic growth and global competitiveness for years to come. We must ensure that any federal initiative embrace technological advances and economic innovation so that our workforce development programs can meet regional economic development needs. This will require the power of the free market to create an economy better than anything government can mandate into existence. I think we have a great panel of witnesses, and I want to thank them for joining us today for a productive discussion about how to reauthorize WIOA to ensure that 21st century workers are prepared to meet 21st century challenges. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. All other members who wish to insert written statements into the record may do so by submitting them to the committee clerk electronically in Microsoft Word format by 5 p.m. on June 10th. I will now introduce the witnesses. Mr. Joe Barela is the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. Previously, Mr. Barela served as the U.S. Department of Labor as a senior advisor, where he helped coordinate the implementation of the WIOA at state and local levels. Welcome to our panel today. We're so happy to have you. Mr. P.J. McGrew is the Executive Director of the Indiana Governor's Workforce Cabinet, which serves as the state's workforce board. As Executive Director, Mr. McGrew strives to find solutions to workforce issues paramount to Indiana's long-term economic viability and the economic mobility of its citizens. Thank you for being with us today, Mr. McGrew. Mr. Sigelman is the CEO of Burning Glass Technologies, a leading labor market analytics company that carries out big data analysis of job posting and career businesses. I now wish to recognize one of our distinguished committee members from Washington, Ms. Jalapal, a leader in the nation, a leader in our Congress, and we are so proud of her as she chairs the Congressional Progressive Caucus. She is going to introduce our final witness, Ms. Jalapal. Let us hear from you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for that beautiful introduction of me, but also for allowing me to recognize one of our witnesses, and thank you for your tremendous leadership of this committee. One of our witnesses is Porsha Wu. She is currently the Managing Director of the U.S. Public Policy for Microsoft. She is focused on issues regarding workforce, skills, and immigration. And of course, Microsoft is a powerful force across the country and headquartered right here in the Seattle area. Ms. Wu previously served in the Obama administration, first as Special Assistant to the President for Labor and Workforce Policy, before becoming Assistant Secretary of the Employment and Training Administration at the U.S. Department of Labor. In that role, she oversaw billions of dollars in federal workforce and training investments. She also worked for Senator Edward Kennedy as Labor Policy Director and General Counsel, as well as serving as the Vice President of Work and Family Issues at the National Partnership of Women and Families, and as an attorney at Bredhoff and Kaiser, where she represented workers, unions, and pension fund trustees. As we celebrate AAPI Heritage Month, it is a pleasure to see you here, Ms. Wu, and to hear the powerful voice that we know you will bring. Thank you, and I look forward to your testimony.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We appreciate the witnesses for participating today, and we look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witnesses that we have read your written statements, and they will appear in full in the hearing record pursuant to Committee Rule 8D and committee practice. Each of you is asked to limit your oral presentation to a 5-minute summary of your written statement. Before you begin your testimony, please remember to unmute your microphone. During your testimony, staff will be keeping track of time, and a light will blink that time is up. Please be attentive to the time and wrap up when your time is over, so I won't have to tell you to wrap up. Then after you wrap up, you remute your microphone. If any of you experience technical difficulties during your testimony or late in the hearing, you should stay connected on the platform. Make sure you are muted and use your phone to immediately call the committee's IT director, and that number was provided to you. We will let all of the witnesses make their presentations before we move to the member questions. When answering a question, please remember to unmute your microphone. The witnesses are aware of their responsibility to provide accurate information to the subcommittee, and therefore we will proceed with their testimony. I now will recognize Mr. Barela for his 5 minutes. Mr. Barela?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Wilson, Ranking Member Dr. Fox, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. As this subcommittee considers the reauthorization of WOIA, I am honored to share Colorado's approaches to serving dislocated workers and supporting lifelong learning, reskilling, upskilling, and next skilling of the workforce, and to provide recommendations to ensure that all workers, learners, and employers are future ready. The Colorado workforce development ecosystem responded to COVID-19 with agility, shifting to remote work and virtual service delivery so we could serve thousands of Coloradans, hundreds of thousands of Coloradans. Now, as we look to recover from the pandemic and preparation for the future of work, we have the opportunity to create a proactive workforce system that builds lifelong learners, a skilled workforce, and connects people with economic success. Our workforce system must be able to act proactively to support workers and communities. In Colorado, our Just Transition Office is using state funds and existing WIOA resources to support coal workers, employers, and communities as they plan for the future closings of coal plants upon which their communities depend. We know that the transition from coal and the COVID-19 pandemic are just a few of many disruptions our communities will face as technology advances and work evolves. WIOA eligibility that allows us to support workers before they are laid off will mitigate the economic impact of these transitions, and it will help us keep communities together. To be successful, our workforce system must also be funded based on more recent data and have the agility to pivot in order to be responsive in a timely manner. Colorado has a dynamic economy, and a funding formula based on 2-year lags in data prevents our system from providing adequate services when it is most needed in a community. Our workforce system must support lifelong learning and facilitate upskilling, reskilling, and next skilling throughout an individual's work life cycle. Increased investments in work-based learning, especially earn and learn models like apprenticeships, are critical to this effort. Work-based learning combines skill development with training opportunities and is a key strategy in Colorado for developing talent and preparing Coloradans for the workforce and evolving labor market. So many underemployed and dislocated workers do not have the ability to stop working, earning a wage, and attend education and training that is separate from the workplace. CDLE partners with local workforce systems, the U.S. Department of Labor, and partner organizations like CareerWise to implement a high-quality apprenticeship system with more than 6,000 apprenticeships and more than 400 registered apprenticeship programs. These programs work and their reach needs to be expanded to youth, underemployed, mid-career professionals, and dislocated workers. When Brandon, a general manager at Old Chicago restaurant, was laid off due to COVID, he decided to make a career change. With support from his local workforce center, he became an apprentice with a local electrician and had costs covered for his supplies from the Dislocated Worker Program. And first year of related instructions were covered as well. He is on track with an industry that is growing and has the potential to reach more than minimum wage and a livable wage in the community he chooses to live here in Colorado. Our workforce system must partner with business and industry. Sector partnerships are partnerships of business leaders from the same industry and in shared regions who work with education, workforce development, economic development, and community organizations to address the talent and the competitiveness needs of their industry. More than 1,600 businesses are actively involved in 30 sector partnerships across Colorado. These sector partnerships inform competency-based career paths that ensure education and training and workforce systems stay attuned and responsive to the needs of the labor market in order to ensure businesses have access to appropriately skilled talent pipelines and prepare students and workers with the skills and credentials they need for jobs and careers. The model for partnership works in all corners of the state and with any type of industry. During the past year, sector partnerships have developed and engaged training strategies to support both incumbent workers and new workers in the field. Our workforce system must provide for workers to reskill, upskill, and connect with quality career paths. This requires effective career coaching. With a partnership and support from the Markle Foundation, Skillful, and the Rework America Alliance, Colorado invests in professional development and support for frontline career development professionals so they apply skills-based practices, labor market insights, and high-quality coaching practices to connect underemployed, mid-career professionals and dislocated workers to opportunities. I encourage you to consider increased investments in career coaching within the workforce system so people have access to this valuable resource throughout their careers. In Colorado, we know that with strategic career navigation, job seekers using workforce system earn about $12,700 more in annualized wages than those who find work on their own. This truly is the value add of the public workforce system. Access to well-trained coaches, availability of and access to career-connected learning to reskill, upskill, and next skill, and labor market aligned with job placement retention. Let me close by saying, again, how proud I am of Colorado's workforce system, which promotes a thriving employment environment with opportunity for every Coloradan to prosper. I hope my remarks have been helpful as you work to reauthorize the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act and ensure all Americans have the ability to find a career and economic success in the future of work. I'm happy to answer any questions from the subcommittee. Thank you.
We will now hear from Mr. McGrew.
Well, thank you, Chair Wilson and Ranking Member Fox. Good afternoon, subcommittee members. My name is PJ McGrew, and I serve as the Executive Director for Indiana Governor Eric J. Holcomb's Workforce Cabinet. I'm pleased to be able to provide and speak to you today about the unique and successful programs we have implemented in Indiana to address critical workforce shortages, providing Hoosiers with the skills they need for greater economic mobility. The Governor's Workforce Cabinet serves as the state's workforce board as outlined in the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. However, we serve as much more than a typical workforce board. In 2018, at the direction of Governor Holcomb, we were tasked to rethink how our workforce system operated. We worked with the state legislature to separate and elevate our workforce board from within the Department of Workforce Development, restructure our membership, and added additional responsibilities that would allow us to begin to break down the silos that exist between state and federal programs. The restructuring of our workforce board necessitated a waiver from the U.S. Department of Labor. Our cabinet is still comprised of a majority of employer partners. However, our chair is from within state government, and that helps us coordinate day-to-day operations across state agencies. The governor's workforce cabinet is able to coordinate activity across the Department of Workforce Development and the Commission for Higher Education on the state's signature state-funded workforce program, Next Level Jobs. Next Level Jobs was created in partnership with the governor and the Indiana General Assembly in 2017 and includes two different funding streams, the Workforce Ready Grant and the Employer Training Grant. Our Workforce Ready Grant program is targeted to individuals and includes free training for up to a one-year certificate at several post-secondary institutions, as well as qualifying providers on our eligible training provider list maintained through WIOA. Each program must be in one of 5 targeted sectors that are vital to the state's economic growth: advanced manufacturing, building and construction trades, business and IT, health and life science, and transportation and logistics. The training must also meet a threshold for wages and occupational demand. In just 3 years of operation, we've had over 44,000 individuals enroll in training, 22,000 individuals complete, and we are seeing median wage gains of $6,800 1 year post-program completion. Last year, under the leadership of Governor Holcomb and the new cabinet, Indiana submitted its first combined WIOA plan, A Better Future for Every Hoosier. In the plan, we prioritized better integration across state and federal programs and are now leveraging our local workforce boards to help implement our Next Level Jobs programs. This type of collaboration would not be possible without restructuring and redesigning the role of the State Workforce Board to be more intentionally focused on other parts of the talent development system other than WIOA. A key focus of our state plan also includes better employer engagement, and the other critical component of our Next Level Jobs program includes an investment in employer-led training through our Employer Training Grant program. Employers can work with a business service representative from their local workforce board or directly with the Department of Workforce Development to access the grant. Employers fill out a brief training plan, and once the training is complete and we have verified wage gains and employment retention, then the employer is eligible for up to a $50,000 reimbursement to help cover the cost of training. Over the past 3 years, over 2,900 employers have participated in the program. We've trained 26,500 individuals, and we're seeing average wage gains of $5,900 per year post-training. Access to training is only one variable in the equation to help provide Hoosiers an opportunity to gain quality employment. Career coaching and working with employers to identify their needs are reasons that we've been proud to partner with the Markle Foundation and Skillful Indiana the past 3 years. In partnership with Skillful, we have launched the Governor's Coaching Corps. This annual cohort of career coaches was established to provide comprehensive training to career coaches from across the talent development system. During the pandemic, we were able to work with Skillful to quickly transition their in-person training to online modules that were piloted within our community college system and are now being scaled beyond. Skillful has also been working with our local boards and employers across the state to take a deeper look at the skills necessary for open positions throughout Indiana. This has resulted in more employers transitioning to skills-based hiring practices. We're extremely proud of the progress we've made in Indiana to address critical workforce shortages and believe the work we've done can help serve as a model to how state and federal programs can work together to serve clients throughout the system. With targeted investments in training programs, we can help equip more Americans with the training necessary to connect to occupations that provide greater economic mobility and employers the talent they need. Thank you for the opportunity to provide committee members an overview of our work. And as the conversations to reauthorize this important federal legislation continue, we stand ready to help serve you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGrew. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Sigelman.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Wilson, Ranking Member Fox, distinguished members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today about this important issue. My name is Matthew Sigelman. I'm the CEO of Burning Glass Technologies, a leading labor market analytics company. Our big data analysis of job postings and of career histories gives us a unique perspective on what employers want, what workers need, and what kind of workforce system the country should pursue as Congress considers reauthorization of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. The challenge facing the American worker is unprecedented. The short-term disruption of the pandemic combines with a longer-term trend of profound change and even disruption in skills. Across the economy, 30% of the skills required in the average occupation today are different from those needed just a decade ago. In fact, the velocity of skill change is outpacing the ability of traditional labor market information sources even to track it. In addition, there's a growing disjoint between the skills of America's workforce and the skills sought by employers. The problem is particularly acute in underserved communities where the opportunity gulf has existed for decades. A study by PolicyLink in the University of Southern California, using data from Burning Glass, estimated there were $2.3 trillion in unrealized economic opportunity in 2018 alone because of inequity in the workforce. This supply-demand mismatch will serve as a potent drag on our national economy, a driver of inequality, and a threat to America's ability to be globally competitive. Fortunately, there are opportunities to reframe the model of workforce development. These new skill adjacency methodologies, such as that developed by Burning Glass for the World Economic Forum, build on the skills workers already have to identify the shortest, most efficient reskilling paths. For instance, a laid-off administrative assistant making on average about $36,000 a year can share as many skills with a production planner. Now that's a role with a strong future, an average salary of $49,000 a year as opposed to 36, and a direct path onward to a career as a logistician earning $78,000 a year. So by targeting the specific skills required to follow this pathway, such as building inventory management skills, the workforce system can place people more quickly, less expensively, and with greater long-term success. From this perspective, we need a workforce system that brings us closer to three great objectives. First, we need a system that can better support the displaced. Now, this is the primary mission of the workforce system as it exists today, yet the massive dislocation caused by the pandemic underscores how ill-prepared we are. To meet this challenge, the workforce system must go beyond focusing on referring people to jobs. Instead, the workforce system will need to train people for the specific skill gaps that will enable their transition. It will need to assess eligible training provider list, ETPL programs, rigorously against metrics of demand to ensure that funds are spent on programs that lead to good opportunities and not to dead ends. It will need to leverage modern skill-based methods for identifying a wider set of relevant job openings for each worker. And our workforce system will need to empower workers themselves with the information they need to navigate to opportunity. Second, we need a system that can provide critical skill development resources for all American workers, not just for those who have been displaced or who are at risk. We often hear of jobs being created and destroyed by technology, but the more significant impact is in how fast existing jobs are being reprogrammed. The rapid pace of skill change will demand that many workers gain skills just to keep the jobs they have. The need for lifelong learning has been evident for some time, but it is also evident that our workforce and educational systems are not equipped currently to support it. This will require that workforce funding be restructured to provide for ongoing learning over time, even after a worker has been successfully placed. And third, we need a system that can be a better partner to industry. Today's system is focused on how to place unemployed workers in jobs, but we need to go beyond that and shift more of our focus to opportunity. What are the opportunities for those workers? And what are the skills employers demand to unlock those careers? That will require a workforce system with new information sources aligned not only with what employers are looking for today, but also the strategic trends that will shape what industry needs tomorrow. Skills are increasingly becoming the currency of the job market. WOIA can play a vital role in assisting American workers to thrive in this new landscape. Once again, thank you for inviting me to testify. I look forward to your questions.
We will now hear from Mr. Wu. Ms. Wu, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to full committee Chair Scott and Ranking Member Fox. And I also want to thank Congresswoman Jayapal for that kind introduction. Members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to testify today. My name is Porsha Wu, and I'm here on behalf of Microsoft and our subsidiary LinkedIn to share our views as leading technology providers who care deeply about our workforce system. As Mr. Sigelman said, our economy, labor markets, and workplaces have changed in fundamental ways since 2014 when WOIA was enacted. And these changes have been accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic. If we want to have a more resilient and equitable economy, our workforce system needs to change too. Change should include bold and innovative investments. That means not just investing more, although we believe that is critical. It also means investing smarter. Federal funds should provide more support for skills training that is relevant to employers and leads to good jobs. We also need to leverage private sector innovations and technology so we can maximize the use of resources. This is not something government can achieve alone. Employers, education and training providers, nonprofits, libraries, and other stakeholders all have a role to play. I'd like to touch quickly on 4 key recommendations. First, workforce systems must support people to gain technology skills over a lifetime. Technology skills have become a core requirement of every industry. I'm guessing every single person in this virtual room learned to use new digital skills or tools during this pandemic. That's because work is where most people learn new skills. But people who are out of work or in jobs that don't provide these opportunities are getting left behind. By some estimates, roughly 1/3 of the US workforce lacks the digital skills that are essential in today's economy. And that number is over 50% for Black and Latino workers. Private sector has a role to play here, and I'm happy to talk about some of our partnerships that we are supporting to advance digital skills. But truly addressing these inequities will require strong, deliberate collaboration across government. For workforce programs, that means WIOA should dedicate funds for digital skills, assessments, and training. And as part of state plans, governors should address digital skill needs for all individuals, particularly those in underserved communities. Second, we need to make better use of low-cost, widely available resources. In the last year, the world of online learning has exploded. LinkedIn Learning saw an 80% increase in online learning, with over 1 million hours of content being accessed worldwide every single week. The workforce system could do more to leverage free or low-cost online training courses. For example, many states require that eligible training providers have a physical in-state presence, which can discourage online training. States should update ETPLs and use other options to ensure cutting-edge tools are available to assist job seekers and employers. Third, we should provide incentives for employers to upskill. The workforce system, as we've discussed, is also charged with supporting employers. During the pandemic, El Paso-based Workforce Solutions Borderplex partnered with Microsoft and city, county, and state government to launch a program to help entrepreneurs and small business owners grow their businesses with technology. That involved helping businesses to get online and provide digital literacy training for employers and employees. More than 200 businesses have already participated, and the program continues to help more businesses and their workers to adapt and grow. We encourage the subcommittee to consider how WIOA can support innovative partnerships like these. It should also consider expanding flexibility and the amount of funds that can be used for incumbent worker training and encourage the use of these funds for acquisition of digital skills. Finally, we should make better use of private sector data and tools to connect workers to jobs and opportunities to learn and demand skills. While it's important to assess what skills individuals still need to learn, we also need to find better ways to assess the skills and experience they already have. Job platforms can see information across millions of employers and jobs, and we need to use those insights to help make better connections. For example, we know that 1/3 of food service workers could not go to work during the pandemic, and many of them are permanently out of a job. But food service workers typically have 70% of the skills for customer service jobs, which are in high demand. Employers and workers need to know of these possible skills matches to take advantage of them. WIOA should encourage and leverage skills and job matching to open up a more equitable and efficient labor market. These are just some of the ways in which we believe our workforce system can be improved to meet the challenges of today and to better serve both workers and tomorrow's as we face the opportunities of the future. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Under Committee Rule 9A, we will now question our witnesses. Under the 5-minute rule, I will be recognizing subcommittee members in seniority order. Again, to ensure that the members' 5-minute rule is adhered to, staff will be keeping track of time, and the timer will show a blinking light when time has expired. Please be attentive to the time, wrap up when your time is over, and remute your microphone. As chair, I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Ms. Wu, in your testimony, you highlight Microsoft Company's skills program, which supports Black local workforce development organizations, including the Opalaka Development Corporation, which operates in my district. I'm well aware of it. How can our workforce system best target investments in under-resourced communities and engage employers to address persistent skills gap among workers of color?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's very important to recognize that who sits at the table influences how workforce funds are distributed and focused. And so it's very important that we have a diverse set of organizations like Opalaka Community Development Corporation to be there to contribute and to partner with the workforce system. So the federal government can encourage that, certainly, but those are decisions that also need to be made at the state and local level to have a diversity of voices at the table. And certainly for employers want to have diverse talent. They also want to make sure that their needs are being met. And so thinking about how the workforce system can better serve small and medium businesses in particular, as they seek to survive and evolve in this pandemic, I think that provides a value add to employers, so they'll be eager to participate and work more closely with the workforce system.
All right, thank you so much. This is for Mr. Barela. Should we consider extending individuals access to supportive services while they're working after training program completion and placement in employment, and how would lower income individuals with barriers to employment benefit from such an extension?
Thank you, Mrs. Chair, for a great question. And you know what, I think you mentioned in your opening address that it's not only the placement, but the retention in these occupations or jobs and career advancement. And so support services when people go to work are so critical so that they can be successful to access the tools, maybe additional training so that they can see advancement in the career, that initial career placement. But I do think the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act needs to allow us to provide support services beyond just a short period of time, but look at, it's important for people to stay at work at 6 months, 1 year and beyond. And so the ability to offer support services, and then again, look at what are the resources available, not only in the public workforce system, but through community-based organizations and other funds to allow those support services to be available, particularly for what we just saw in the pandemic, those occupations who weren't able to work from home, to access childcare, to access transportation. Those are all costs that only are increased when someone is able to go to work. So definitely the opportunity and the availability of support services is critical to not only retention, but career advancement.
Thank you. Ms. Wu, in your current capacity as Managing Director for Public Policy, and as a former Assistant Secretary for the Employment of Training Administration at the Department of Labor, can you speak to the importance of fully funding WOIA adult program, which supports incumbent worker training?
Absolutely. As has been referenced earlier, the workforce system has been underfunded for quite some time. And this has never been a more dire situation because frankly, we have millions more Americans who need this help and need these supports. We know workforce system supports work, supportive services work, and also helping people find jobs is more critical than ever. So we believe absolutely there is more funding and more support that's needed. Private sector needs to do its part too, but we all need to work together to support this system and get more people the skills for the jobs of tomorrow.
All right. Mr. Barela, Due to funding shortfalls, only about 30% of individuals who interact with the workforce are able to access training. How do individual training accounts function? And should Congress expand funding in these ITAs?
Madam Chair, great question. In Colorado, and I believe it was referenced before, with only 30% are accessing training. In the last program year, we reported on about 77,000 individuals receive services through the public workforce system, American Job Centers.
Should they be funded under Pell Grants? Should the funding levels be provided as high as Pell Grants, which is currently $6,500?
Definitely, and I think it should be encouraged. A lot of workforce boards are keeping those training caps down just because of low funding levels, and they want to serve more people. And so if we could raise those funds to Pell Grant levels, it requires more funding to do so, but also the availability with additional funding so that we can serve more people through upskilling, reskilling, and next-skilling. That there's a cost involved. And so it's very important to increase the availability. I think workforce boards have that ability to do so, and also to attach the training to labor market information in those communities.
Thank you so much. I'm out of time. I now recognize Representative Fox for the purpose of questioning the witnesses.
Thank you, Chairwoman Wilson. And again, I thank our witnesses for being with us today. Mr. Sigelman, you discussed at length in your testimony the need for our workforce system to be more demand-driven and a better partner for industry. At the same time, workers are not well served by a system that focuses solely on credentials without identifying skills that individuals already possess. What is driving this disconnect between supply and demand? How can WIOA help to address the problem? And what benefits will workers and employers see if we can close this gap?
Thank you, Ranking Member Fox, for the question. I will, you asked about the question of the mismatch between supply and demand. And it's a critical one because one of the things that we're seeing right now is a very strange phenomenon, what it seems on the surface to be a strange phenomenon of millions of people who have been displaced, and at the same time, increasingly urgent skills gaps. And I'll put it simply this way. 1 million displaced wait staff can't fill a single cybersecurity job. And so what we're seeing is that as employers let go, have had to let go of people as they begin to rehire now as the economy recovers. Employers are making a bet whenever you make a hire on the future of your business. And so employers are starting to hire for the future skills that they need. So as a result, on the one hand, workers who have been working in a field for decades may not have the skills they need to get their old job back. And at the same time, it means that employers are doubling down on skills that were already in short supply. Our workforce system can help to bridge that gap by tracking the sets of skills that are in demand for jobs today, and by being responsive to those changes in demand.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. McGrew, thanks for sharing the exciting work that Indiana is doing to strengthen the workforce in your state. We often talk about how states can serve as, quote, laboratories of democracy that are often more innovative than the federal government. One issue you mentioned that seems to plague our workforce system is the balance between accountability and flexibility for the list of eligible providers of education services. What recommendations do you have on how to maintain the quality of providers while also welcoming new and innovative actors onto these lists to address the in-demand skills needed in the future?
Well, thank you, Ranking Member Fox, for that question. I think it has, in part, things to do with what Matt was just discussing in terms of looking at in-demand jobs and skills. And it's really twofold. What we do here, we have two mechanisms: that wage and demand threshold that we look at for program eligibility, while at the same time we are monitoring outcomes of our programs. looking at job placement rates, looking at completion rates, and looking at wages. I think if more states took a both and approach to looking at both the labor market information to drive investment, as well as the outcomes of programs, we would be able to better serve all Americans.
I want to inject something in here that I think is important that none of you have talked about in your written testimony or in your spoken testimony. And I think it's a tremendous opportunity that's being left out. Every employer has the opportunity to spend $5,250 for education expenses for an employee. You all are asking us for a lot more money through WOIA when I hear nobody talking about the fact that employers who have the greatest interest at heart in filling their jobs could be using this money. Furthermore, I'm not sure exactly which one of the CARES Act bills that passed, but we are currently approving $5,250 for any employer to give to pay off student loans and for an employee. I do not understand why those things aren't getting more play and why you all aren't talking about that. Every one of you should be pushing those things, and nobody is mentioning that. We need to be pushing that too. Every member of Congress needs to be doing that. It is no cost to the employers to pay those expenses, and it is not income to the employee. And I'm doing everything I can to get that word out. And I think we need to do more. I don't think we need more money in these programs. I don't think the money's being spent very well. And I don't think all the resources that are available to employers are being used wisely. And I think I'm going to be asking you all a lot more questions when this hearing's over about what you're doing to get accountability and to use all the resources that are available to you. But I thank you very much. And Mr. Barela, please tell Governor Polis I said hello, because he was one of 2 Republicans who voted for the Skills Act when it originally passed the House of Representatives. He got it a long time ago. Thank you very much.
One of the few Democrats.
Yeah, one of the 2, I said.
You said Republicans.
Oh, sorry, one of the 2 Democrats, excuse me, that voted for it. Sorry, thank you, Mr. Scott. I appreciate your correcting me. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I will convey that message to Governor Polis. Thank you.
Leadership, all of you are overtime. Dr. Scott, I think it's important also why we are fighting to bring up why we're fighting so hard for this $15 minimum wage to be instituted, but also we need to make sure that our employers know all of the benefits that came out of the CARES package. I agree with you 100%. And now, Mr. Takano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm certain that Governor Polis is relieved that he is still known as a Democrat. My first question is to Mr. Barela. Mr. Barela, research has indicated that career navigation services can make a big difference in helping connect workers, especially for individuals with barriers to employment, to the right training in jobs. What are navigation services? Can you answer it? What is meant by navigation services, Mr. Barela?
Rep. Takano, thank you for the question. You know, what we feel in Colorado is when people have access to a career navigator, a career coach that knows about the labor market, knows about what training demands from industries that are growing or in their communities, there's a better connection to their current portfolio of skills and what they may need to boost our access skills training so that there's a better placement. And the career connected input is related to the labor market in that community. And so, what that coach will do is assess where they are, their life experiences, maybe their education, but also the skills they've learned on their job, and then match that to what's going in the economy. So if there is an investment, or it could be work-based learning where there's a wage involved, where we put them in on-the-job training or an apprenticeship program, there's a better connection to career path, and the retention's better. When you know that there's a good match, when you place someone in training and then a job, we hope that the retention and then the career path in that will lead to a better outcome for that worker and for the employer. Employers don't like to rehire and rehire when there's not a good fit.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for letting us know what navigation services are. How does Colorado's workforce system provide job seekers or career changers access to these services that determine which employment or training options are right for them? I just want you to kind of embellish on what you were saying.
Sure. In Colorado, again, as I mentioned in my testimony, we work very closely with the Markle Foundation, and we started with their career coaching training, and we've had over 60 coaches that have gone through that one-year program. We're in discussions to look at how do we make that available to every career coach in every American Job Center of the 53 we have in Colorado, have that training virtually and ongoing, so that they have the ability from that curriculum to look at labor market information, to do assessments, to look at profiles of individuals, to look at a human-centered design. But the counterpart to that is making sure we work with employers so they're not shutting the door to people who may not have proxies such as an education credential or years of experience, that they're really looking at the jobs and the competence and skills that are needed in those growing sectors. And they may look at a resume that is skills-based so that they're not shutting the door, especially for our marginal communities, people of color, low-income individuals that may not have that credential that most employers look for with an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree.
Yeah, it's getting not having to be stuck on the credential. There's other ways to validate what it is they can do. What impact would expanding access to individualized career services and navigation supports through a WOIA reauthorization have on helping people get back to work or find better career pathways?
Quincy, don't we have a flag in our office?
I'm sorry.
I think I heard you. I think the access would allow was in regards to, I talked about, people who have the opportunity to work with our current workforce system. Not all the coaches have been trained, and our annualized outcomes at the workforce system are about $12,700 better for the people that come into our centers than someone who tries to find a job on their own. If we would have all our coaches trained and upskilled and consistently up to date with the labor market information and tools that would make them better, that outcome would be even higher, I believe. And, someone, I think Ranking Member Fox mentioned that we need to see a better retention rate of 70%. I do think that would be impacted, where we'd see a better retention rate from the training inputs, or even the direct labor exchange we offer individuals would greatly be improved.
Well, great. Mr. McGrew, you've noted that there are not enough slots in qualified training programs to meet the demand for training in your state. What are the challenges to expanding training program capacity?
Thank you, Representative, for the question. It really is, I think, twofold here. Capacity of the provider community to actually have those slots available. We work primarily with our community college system on our Next Level Jobs program, so making sure that all of the training that has been identified is available at those campuses, and we're able to meet those local needs is extremely important, and things that we are continuing to work through with them. But I also think, when we look at how we fund our current programs within the state funds that we have available, there's so much demand that we oftentimes run out of that funding halfway through the year. So we are, borrowing from other programs in order to fill that need. And then creating that awareness and the connectivity to the employer is extremely important in getting them to recognize investments that they're making as well. And that's why I think on our employer training grant program, we're seeing employers invest many more dollars than that $50,000 reimbursement that we're seeing. So it really is trying to take that comprehensive approach to the entire system is really what our goal is.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I apologize for going over time, but I yield back.
Thank you so much. We all have our days. Mr. Good of Virginia. You're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank you to our entire panel and all of our witnesses here today, and thank you for the opportunity to ask you some questions. And I'm actually going to do something today that we don't hear enough of, and that's the innovation and the economic opportunity that comes from the results achieved by the real leaders in the private sector and rural America, instead of more Washington knows best promises that we often hear from. In order to address the needs of displaced workers, I think it's important to acknowledge private innovation and the investment that is already meeting these needs, and I want to give credit where it is due. I want to highlight specifically Microsoft's presence in my district as one such example. Microsoft has a facility in rural Mecklenburg County that acts as a data center and a major employer for the area. For most of you who probably don't know Mecklenburg, it's a beautiful county with great communities, and I'm proud to represent them. Sadly, it has endured the pain of economic displacement like other rural areas throughout the country, as some of its historic industries have shrunk or been displaced. But Microsoft has a presence going back some 10 years in the district, in this community, bringing digital innovation to this part of rural Southside Virginia. And this does not simply represent one additional employer for my district, but it's actually helped change the way we view education and workforce development more broadly. Mecklenburg County is currently in the process of constructing a modern high school expected to open in fall of 2022 with specialized career tracks for students to develop the skills they need to thrive in a skill-based economy. Among the many skilled, job-ready specialties offered, things such as electrical, mechanical, plumbing, welding, etc., also included is advanced technology with a credential that is required to work at this local Microsoft data center. So for those looking to Washington, D.C. or Congress to have all the answers, and I say go to Mecklenburg and see what Microsoft and our community education leaders there are doing that this body so often fails to do: innovate and recognize the value in rural America. So my question, probably expectedly with that lead in, is for Mrs. Wu with Microsoft. Ms. Wu, aside from direct investment of more hardworking taxpayer dollars, how can Congress help and encourage the private sector to develop innovative opportunities like what Microsoft has done in rural Mecklenburg County in Virginia?
Thank you, Congressman. We're very proud of our work in your district. And frankly, we've learned a lot from working with Southside Virginia Community College. I think something we learned from that is as they say, it takes a village. And so sometimes federal dollars can be a helpful sort of leveraging point. They can also be a helpful convener, the workforce system, to sort of bring people together and show, look, here are where the gaps. Here are some partners that can work together. They can use non-federal dollars, as you said, but sort of bringing people together to have a better understanding of the needs and the different supports is very important. Something we really learned from that partnership, for example, is there need to be supports all the way along. You got to recruit students. Students need scholarships, which we provided. They need devices. Their devices weren't up to snuff. When we worked with the community college to say, okay, well, we'll have a data center lab so we can simulate what it's like to work in a data center. Turned out in the building, the electrical systems needed to be upgraded to build the lab. So there are many stages along the way and many ways that different partners, government or non-government, can pitch in to help.
Thank you for that answer. Why do you think some might view rural America as an economic liability rather than an opportunity for investment, as Microsoft did a few years back here in Mecklenburg? And what can be done to improve or rectify that perception of rural America?
Well, first of all, I think it's going out to our communities and really listening and working with partners. Microsoft is proud to partner with 4-H and Future Farmers of America on making sure people all over the United States have digital skills. And we learned our lesson. People want to stay in the communities where they were raised. You can try to bring in talent from somewhere else, but those people maybe won't stay. So actually investing in communities, getting people the skills they need, it benefits us not only because they may work at the data center, but they may open other businesses, start their own tech firms in the area. And that way we can help to grow a hub of innovation, which is what we're really trying to do.
Well, thank you all for being part of the solution there in that rural part of Virginia, Mecklenburg County. And Chairman, my time has expired, so I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Good. And now, Representative Jollipaugh of Washington.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and great to hear the bipartisan support for this. I've seen in my district how WIOA can help workers connect with strong, well-paying jobs, and I wanted to root it also in a real person's story. This is the story of Gloria, a woman that was helped by my neighborhood houses WIOA program. Gloria wanted to earn more so she could move out of her doubled up living situation, but she also needed a swing shift because she only had evening care for her children. Neighborhood House, which is a nonprofit here, identified a job at Harborview Medical Center and helped her to apply and negotiate her salary to $21.40 an hour. She is now living with her family in a 2-bedroom apartment, has a savings account, and is becoming more financially secure. I think that's the type of assistance that is more critical than ever as we recover from a recession that has hit women, people of color, and people in lower wage jobs particularly hard. Women, many of them women of color, have lost 5.4 million jobs overall during the recession. And in December of 2020 alone, women accounted for nearly all the jobs lost, with a disproportionately high number of job losses coming from women of color. Mr. Barela, what role should the public workforce system play in making sure that workers hardest hit by this pandemic are not being left behind?
Thank you, Representative. Great question. We know that the disruption that has happened as of the economic crisis from COVID has hit young people and women and people of color exponentially difficult. I think we need to make sure that access points for these individuals are available, like you mentioned, in the community, the neighborhood housing or the house program. We need to make sure that no matter what door someone walks in, that the public workforce system has resources and availability of upskilling potential. We also need to get back to that learning doesn't have to be separate from earning. And so for especially people of color and young women, single mothers, where we can train them, credential them while they're working and earning a wage is so critical. And those need to be available at every juncture of their career, not just when there's disruption. I think we need to make sure that we work in partnership with our businesses and industries so that skilling, upskilling, reskilling, next skilling is happening while they're working, so that potentially they can escape the next economic downturn because of those interventions. And so we need to look at how apprenticeships, lifetime, not just when they're young people, but mid-career professionals can access the opportunity to be relevant in growing industries and with skills as they earn money as well.
Very important. Thank you so much. Mr. Sigelman, as of last month, 4.2 million people were experiencing long-term unemployment. And in the last recession, we saw that Asian Americans experienced more long-term employment than any other group. That trend has continued under this recession. What lessons should we take from the last recession to not only ensure that people find new employment, but also find more suitable careers that keep them in the labor force? And are there particular steps that should be taken to address long-term unemployment among Asian Americans and other groups?
One of the greatest tragedies of the job market, as we've seen in past recessions and we're seeing in this one, is also one of its greatest opportunities. It's kind of what your rearview mirror says, objects in mirror are closer than they appear, and people and opportunities are often just a few skills apart. We too often try to match people at very literal levels. So somebody loses a job in a field, and in many places, workforce systems are trying to find another job in that same occupation. Opportunities in that occupation often experience shortage at the same time. And so we need to be able to refocus the way, first of all, that we help people look for and identify opportunities, and to be based on the skills that they have rather than the jobs that they've been in. And second, we need to use that same idea to refocus workforce training programs to make sure that we are being as efficient as possible. People will often have to take a step down. And as a result, and one of the things we've learned from the past recessions is that people who have been displaced wind up, as you've pointed out, on the sidelines of the economy for long periods of time, and ultimately sometimes, unfortunately, never get back to where they were. The key is, as Mr. Barela was just saying, it's so important to make sure that we can provide ongoing support to workers. If you're on the
Thank you.
Titanic, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I get Ms. Wu in here because she worked on this in the last recession for the Obama administration. Anything you want to add on this topic, Ms. Wu, from your experience?
I agree with what Mr. Sigelman said. I think it's also important for the department to think about under WIOA or otherwise, how to have some targeted interventions, especially for those who end up long-term unemployed. When people have been unemployed for a long time, they can lose hope. They lose attachment. And I think there are a lot of tools that can keep people sort of continuously learning and showing their skills in other ways and provide that positive affirmation for them.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. My time has expired, so I yield back.
Thank you so much. And now Representative Rothman of Wisconsin. Representative Rothman? Ms. Stephanie?
Glenn, can you hear? Obviously can't, Madam Chairman. I apologize. Go ahead to the next person. We'll try to get him to be available the next time. Thank you.
Representative Sparks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I very happy to see PJ here in the committee from Indiana. I know that Indiana took very forward-looking on the innovative approach to workforce development, and it's a very needed. And I was proud to be part of this efforts. And I know I just would like you to share some of the things we're talking, how we can have a better collaboration between state and federal governments. And I wanted for you to just maybe mention a few of the things what we can improve in the flexibility of structure, how the state manage workforce development programs, and also maybe in the flexibility of funding streams that could streamline all of these processes. Could you just share some of the examples how we could do better so we can have a better return on investment and when we invest in human capital, which is very important?
Well, thank you, Representative. It's great to see you again. I think a couple of things on that front. What we've been able to do with the waiver that we received from USDOL from our board structure so that we can really start to coordinate more activity across state and federal programs was so important. What we found was that, you know, our former workforce board was really driven by the Workforce Development Agency, and we weren't seeing that connectivity across all of our programs. So by removing that and separating that out, elevating that a little bit and putting that directly underneath the governor's office and driving toward his vision with a chair from our government system to better coordinate those activities on a day in and day out basis is so vital to what we've been able to do the last several years. In terms of flexibility, I know we have talked a lot about supportive services and other programs to be able to connect people to. I think taking a broader look across where various funding streams are in federal programs, especially those programs that also provide employment and training services to individuals that are on SNAP and other federal programs is very, very, very important. And one of the reasons why we opted to do a combined plan, so that we looked at it in terms of eligibility across these programs so we could start to stack funding streams together to see that ROI instead of having disparate systems trying to accomplish some of the same goals. So I think as we consider WIOA reauthorization, that connectivity, flexibility of funding streams, I think especially as it relates to the core programs within WIOA and the people that are being served at a local level and how we can transfer funds back and forth between those programs will definitely go a long way.
Thank you very much. And one of the issues is also maybe all of the panelists can briefly mention as a CPA and someone who work a lot of in financial fields, it seems like, you know, financial literacy is really something that it's a big discussion because ultimately, we start our careers, but our investment in our future, investment in assets and in our careers really creates an understanding of finances. That's why we create wealth in advance in our careers. And it seems I taught at college a little bit too, accounting, and was a high school ambassador for CPA Society. And it seems like there is such a lack of understanding core basic principle, of finances. And we are like a powerhouse of finance and not educated our children and about the finances. So I want to just from the panelists, if you've been successful implementing, PJ, you can start and maybe go quickly through all of the panelists, have been successful with some of the initiatives and where you see maybe we can do better.
Yeah, I think we can, again, as several members of the subcommittee have already alluded to, and of the other panelists, leverage what is happening within the private sector. I just met with an employer last week who had mentioned that they were raising their wages from $11.50 an hour to over $15 an hour. But recognizing with those wage gains, their employees were going to have other issues that they were dealing with that new income, and wanting to provide them with comprehensive financial planning services to be able to accomplish that. I think we need to interject, just like digital literacy skills, that financial planning within our workforce system, so that as individuals go through training and are placed at higher wage occupations, they know how to use those resources moving forward.
Anyone else?
Mr. Barela before discussed the importance of career navigation programs, and I couldn't agree more. And I think I bring that up here because we have to think about career navigation not just as once and done, but as an ongoing support for people to have the skills that will enable them to keep going in their careers, not just to place into the first job, but to keep progressing upward and to achieve the American dream. They need a broad set of skills, a broad set of foundational skills, as well as the kind of financial literacy skills to enable them to navigate their careers and build prosperity.
Yeah, thank you very much. But I agree with you. We have to teach people how to create wealth. And so thank you. I think my time expired. I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Representative Omar, welcome.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Really appreciate this hearing today. My home state of Minnesota has started taking an important step in addressing the racial disparities of economic and educational outcomes in our workforce system. The Minnesota Strategy Plan has 2 racial equity goals: reducing educational and skill training and employment disparities based on race, disability, gender, or disconnected youth, and building employment-led partnerships that expand the talent pipeline to be inclusive of race, disability, gender, and age. However, as I'm sure you all know, there aren't federal guidelines to encourage all states and localities to explicitly include demographic goals in their workforce plan. Mr. Barela, I'm curious to hear if Colorado has similar goals in their strategic plan to close racial equity gaps and improve outcomes for disenfranchised communities.
Thank you, Representative Omar. Great question. And I think part of the documents that I sent you is we have the talent equity agenda that really sets the pathway for Colorado workers and business industry and even educators to start looking at how we are serving our diverse population in Colorado. And the goal of that equity agenda is that every Coloradan has the opportunity to upskill, reskill, and next skill, so they have a valid career path to live in the community that they call home here in Colorado. And so we will be looking at how we can, first of all, put out there that we aren't doing as well with some of our marginalized populations, our people of color, are disabled, and what we need to put in resources and programs so that they have a fair opportunity to reach success in the world of work. So great question. And we are paying attention to that. We have that equity agenda plan, and we also have a talent pipeline that specifically targets where we're not meeting the mark in Colorado and we need to do better.
Glad to hear that. Have these efforts yielded positive results for historically disenfranchised communities in your state?
They have, and over the years, we've done the talent equity, but this is the first year for the talent equity agenda, but with the talent pipeline report has seen progress in our Hispanic populations and our Black populations. We know that we have to do better with attainment of not only basic skills in high school education, but we also need to see how we can make opportunities for credentialing post high school, post-secondary education, so that they have a chance to look at career paths that look beyond minimum wage.
Thank you so much. I've been talking to many communities in our district about their concerns during this post-COVID economic recovery. The most common priority brought up to me was that we need to create a holistic support system to help people fully participate in our economy and greater society. This means improving access to essential supportive services, from cash assistance to childcare and from transportation to housing. The economic and human toll of the COVID-19 pandemic has been devastating. And so it is understandable that many Americans will need additional support just to be able to participate and succeed in these programs. Putting funds towards training and career services can only take us so far if we also aren't addressing the underlying socioeconomic disparities, preventing many people from entering or staying in the workforce in the first place. So, Mr. McGrew, could you discuss how your state is handling the delivery of support services to address the systematic inequities faced by underserved communities?
Thank you, Representative, for that question. I think one of the main focuses that we had on and within our strategic plan was really co-location of services and cross-trained staff, so that we were making sure that all of our staff were aware of the various programs that existed to help support individuals through their education and training journeys, such as cash assistance or food assistance. I think one of the unique things that we are doing in Indiana is we have deployed a group of ambassadors to select locations across the state to learn how these programs are actually being implemented at a local level, to understand the barriers, and then we can come back and pull what policy levers we need to be able to provide those supports that are needed and changes within the system. The other thing that we have done, and this was strategic on our part with data that we were using and had seen over the first couple of years of our employer training grant program, was that we carved out a set amount of funding that we actually went above and beyond this past fall of our employer training grant designated to minority businesses, women-owned businesses, and veteran-owned businesses. And we set aside $5 million initially for that effort, and then we ended up spending over $7 million and saw an increase of about 200% of such employers. So
that's great. I know I'm out of time. It would be really interesting to see if any of these training programs have helped with retention in employment in your state. Madam Chair, I yield back.
He can follow up in writing if you would so desire. Thank you so much. And now, Mr. Grothman, are you here?
Thank you. Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear
Good.
you.
Going to switch a original question I had after hearing that last question from the Congresswoman from Minneapolis. A big complaint I get from my employers is they feel the government benefits are so generous. They are paying people to sit on the sideline, which means they're not only not working, but not getting the work experience you need to move in a more highly skilled position. Have any of the four of you, as you talk to your employers, heard about the complaints of the current dollars flowing out of Washington, that they're too generous and are causing people's life to stagnate? Mr. McGrew, anybody? I mean, I hear it all the time. That's why I wondered. Anybody? Nobody heard that?
I'd like to talk just a little bit about what we're doing to help resolve some of those issues with the folks that we have on unemployment insurance currently, and using data to better serve those individuals. What we've done throughout the pandemic has really been to look at our unemployment insurance claimants' data, their educational attainment levels, their job experiences, and have started to use that data to group them into various groups by workforce region, and then provide very specific and targeted information to them about if they do not have a high school diploma, the adult education program nearest them in their region. If they are looking for certain jobs, sending them job postings on those.
Yeah, what if the employers think they're sitting on the sideline and when they come in, they offer them a job and then they won't show up? What do you do with people like that?
I have not heard that specific complaint from our employers about offering jobs and people not showing up to work.
Okay, I think I broaden your. Okay, my second concern is we continue to, I think, get too many people who are directed wrongly, and they may get a vague college degree that doesn't lead to a job, and later on get a skills-based education from the tech school or for a second degree or from their employer themselves. Could you comment on what you're all doing to prevent people from getting degrees that don't lead to a valuable skill? Is anybody doing anything to prevent that?
Congressman Grothman, this is Joe Barela. I would say, again, would stress how important that career navigation is for young people and mid-career professionals, so that if we're going to invest public money or private money of their own, or even loan money, that training leads to employment in a career pathway. We are so far beyond the days where we could train and pray that there's a job at the end of the training pipeline.
Just to ask you guys, because I talk to young people all the time, can you give me, say, three or four college degrees that you would suggest I advise my high school students to stay away from?
College degrees or high school degrees? I'm sorry.
College degrees, yeah.
You know, I don't know if there's a particular one I would say stay away from. I mean, young people need to be in tune with their local labor markets. Where do they want to work? And are
Okay.
they're hiring?
I'll rattle off four for you. Psychology, political science, communication arts, and social work. What do you think of when people say I'm getting a degree in one of those four fields?
Well, I will tell you, I have a dual degree, one in psychology and one in biology, and I'm working and I have really enjoyed my profession in human services and workforce development, human capital development. So I really think it depends on the individual and what they want to do with that degree, and that's where coaching comes into play. If you can attach any type of learning, if it's professional education, if it's academic education, is there a job and a career path at the end of it?
I'll ask you this. We put a lot of money into this. The last thing we need is more money, because we're paying people to get one degree and then later on another certificate. Do you think we should condition federal Pell Grants, federal loans on aiming for a skills-based degree that people need, like nursing?
I do think that any resources that are spent on a degree in education should be attached to skills and competencies and those industries and sectors that are growing.
Okay, so not Pell Grants for everything under the sun. Thank you. I will quote you on that. Anybody else comment on that?
Well, and that's the role of the local workforce boards. They can decide how they can use their resources in any of the Title I programs and how they reward and allow people to use those funds that are connected to the labor market in their community.
Okay, thank you very much. We have lots of other questions, but I'm sure the other people will catch them.
Okay. Before recognizing our next witness, I just want to note that there has been plenty of reporting done to show that people are not, in fact, sitting on the sidelines out of the labor market because of pandemic unemployment, but because the wages and the benefits employers are offering are too low. They don't even make the positions attractive to potential candidates. That is why even some Republicans have now acknowledged that we need to raise the minimum wage, and why this committee right here that you're sitting on has led the charge on increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour. If there were really a labor shortage, then wages would go up, but they aren't. We also need more resources for our workforce system to help people find pathways to new jobs, which is what we are discussing today. Not unemployment insurance, which our committee has no jurisdiction over. And with that, I now recognize Representative Ledger Fernandez of Mexico.
Thank you, Chairwoman Wilson, for that clarification and for holding this hearing, and Ranking Member Murphy. I want to also thank our witnesses for joining us today to share the apprenticeships, the coaching, the talent equity approaches, and lifelong learning programs at work. You know, I am struck by the burning glass documentation of a $2.3 trillion opportunity gap, and I hope that we can meet that challenge using WIOA. I want to talk a little bit about something that I think affects my home state a lot, but also this entire country. And that is, in New Mexico, 1 in 10 paychecks is tied to the arts. And while that's especially important in New Mexico, the creative economy is essential to the entire US economy. But since the start of the pandemic, the United States has lost an estimated $15.2 billion in the arts and cultural sector. Creative workers have been some of the most severely impacted by the COVID pandemic. At the height, 63% of creative workers experienced unemployment. Mr. Barela, can you elaborate on what Colorado is doing to help provide employment opportunities for those engaged in the creative economy?
Thank you, Representative Fernandez. And my heart's with you. My family has roots in New Mexico and Southern Colorado. So my parents have a home in Santa Fe. So the arts are so important to me growing up. And so want to let you know, in Colorado, we do, I mentioned sector partnerships. We do have a specific sector partnership that works on the creative arts industry. And so bringing together employers and community-based organizations to work with us through the workforce system to make sure that we have talent pipelines for people interested in going into the career arts and even the entrepreneurial field with creative industries. So that's how we are making sure that the arts industry is recognized, and we're supporting that in Colorado because it's so important to our economy as well. We also have, through the pandemic, people who are on unemployment insurance highlighting sectors that are hiring and growing. In April, one of our weeks was specifically spent on the growing job openings in the creative arts industries. And so want to let you know that, you know, just as in New Mexico, making sure that people have a variety of opportunities to take to the public workforce system and go into careers that are growing, and we need them to grow to support our tourism industry and our heritage are important to the public workforce system.
Thank you for summarizing that. I'm actually working on federal legislation to create a grants program under the Department of Labor in consultation with the National Endowment for the Arts to put creatives to work. Sort of creating that art and experiences that can be enjoyed by the public. This is inspired by the WPA. We all remember the beautiful WPA Federal Project 1 after the Depression. And we see the murals, the beautiful art that has been preserved, some of our most iconic artwork coming out of the Depression and the WPA. And what I loved about it is it was celebrating cultures, as you mentioned, our heritage across diverse communities. I hope you'd be willing to work with me on getting that structured and with great input from Colorado as well.
Would love that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And you know, when we think about the ability of the arts to inspire a nation, I only need to remember Amanda Gorman's inauguration poem, "For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it." So on the issue of light, another workforce that needs our help in New Mexico and across the entire country is fossil fuel workers. And as we move towards clean energy to address the climate crisis, I want to make sure we don't forget the folks who earned their living supplying energy to our nation. Mr. Sigelman, I'm struck by the burning glass model and how that could be applied to displaced oil and gas workers. Have you found any best practices for these folks in particular that we can adopt in this reauthorization of WIOA?
Thank you, Representative Leger-Fernandez. And such an important opportunity right now to build on the skills that those working in the carbon economy have. As we see growing levels of decarbonization of the economy, we're going to need to be able to build bridges. And that starts by recognizing the skills that oil and gas workers have and using those to identify a broader set of opportunities for them. One of the things compounding the challenge there is, of course, the geography of the carbon economy and the geography of the green economy don't always align. And so one of the things we'll have to do in addition to aligning up skills is making sure that we can leverage remote technologies and the like to be able to build bridges for those workers. They can find the opportunities and the kind of incomes they deserve.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sigelman. My time has expired, but that goes to the point that was mentioned earlier. If people want to stay and live in the place they call home, I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ms. Fulcher of Idaho? No. Ms. Mueller Meeks?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I just say I've spent my day today traveling to various employers in my district, and contrary to statements just made here in Iowa, they're having tremendous difficulty in hiring people. And these are not jobs at minimum wage. These are jobs at 16, 25, 30 an hour, and even some employers jobs that are between 80 to 130,000 a year with excellent benefits. So I just wanted to add that in, that there are good paying jobs in Iowa. So if people want to relocate, we would welcome them here. Mr. McGrew, it seems like Indiana has a rather unique structure for your state workforce system. This structure has also seemingly influenced your state planning process across multiple programs. How have you maintained a strong employer voice on your state board while also increasing coordination across government agencies at the state level? Has this structure enabled you to more effectively bridge gaps between the education and workforce systems?
Well, thank you, Representative, for that question. In terms of maintaining employer voice, so we do have a policy committee underneath the cabinet, and it is primarily employers. So that we have 5 employers on that representing the various sectors that are a part of our Workforce Ready Grant program. And then we have 4 members from different state agencies that are implementing programs, the Commission for Higher Education, Department of Workforce Development, our Department of Education, and then myself. So, we really get to hear from our employers there, but also then working with our local workforce boards and their employers and serving them and sitting in on their quarterly meetings of our Workforce Board Association to get that feedback of what's happening at a local level. In terms of coordinating across state agencies, yeah, I do believe by having a chair that serves in state government, runs a state agency, we are able to better coordinate that activity, especially since the governor appointed our Commissioner for Higher Education. We are seeing the bridging of that education and workforce gap. I oftentimes like to say that workforce development anymore is educational attainment paired with supportive services and skills that are aligned to economic needs. And that's what we're doing with the targeted investments that we're making in our Next Level Jobs program.
So thank you for that. And here in Iowa, we're similar, where our employers have a voice because they know what skill sets they need, so that training can be provided, whether it's at the high school level, concurrent enrollment in community college, or they're at the facility for that skills training. So thank you very much. Ms. Wu, after LinkedIn's experience piloting skills-based hiring, you found that the company was able to both broaden the talent pool you were drawing from and improve hiring efficiency. I believe that efforts like this will be increasingly important as the world moves into a more skills-based economy. And so 2 questions. Do avenues like TikTok, which have been hiring, we learned that they were hiring people to help the cartels bring people across the border, but I know that TikTok is now for young people become an avenue that they look for employment. And then also through LinkedIn and other avenues, how can the workforce system do a better job of focusing not just on credentials, but on individual skills?
Thank you for that question. I think, one of the things, I'm not as familiar with some of the TikTok workforce efforts, but, part of it is the workforce system has to go to where people are to try to reach them. And there was a question earlier about how can it do a better job of serving employers. This partnership we had in El Paso, they were very creative. They had laptops. Workforce staff went out. They went to where businesses are. Businesses owners are busy. They're trying to run their business. And so in order to support them, coming to where people are and providing those services is tremendously important. We do think we're building on our skills-based hiring pilot, working with other companies that are interested in the same thing. And I think we have to remember, actually, before the pandemic, the labor market was really tight. And so there were a lot of jobs already going unfilled. And a lot of employers are saying, we're having a tough time filling these jobs. Maybe if we have a slightly broader lens, cast a wider net, we'll find more people and at the same time achieve the ends of acknowledging people's skills and hiring people who maybe don't have the existing job title or degree, but can do the job very well. You know, everyone has to do a job for the first time. And so making sure that people who have skills, but not necessarily the job title already are included is important.
And some of the data and information you gain through these events and outreach, do you relay those back to like community college or other apprenticeship programs so they're aware of what's available and what skills are needed?
Yes, absolutely. We try to partner with local workforce boards and provide that information to them, as well as community colleges and other partners.
Thank you. My time ran out. I yield back my time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And now the very patient superstar, Mr. Jones of New York.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for those kind words, and to all of our witnesses for being here to share your testimony today. I'm glad the committee is looking at how we can create pathways to employment for workers who have lost their jobs for one reason or another. The past year has demonstrated why investments in workforce development are critically needed. Millions of people lost their jobs as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent economic fallout. And during this time, many turned to workforce programs for assistance. Fortunately, we are on the path to recovery as things get back to normal. In my district, the unemployment rate has dropped from 15% at the height of the pandemic to around 6% today. There is still so much that needs to be done as we recover from the past year, which is why I'm glad our focus today is on the workforce and fostering employment opportunities. As members of Congress, it is our responsibility to ensure that all people have the resources they need to get back into the workforce after having lost a job, especially our vulnerable populations, which are at a disadvantage because they lack those resources. Mr. Sigelman, I read in your testimony that racial inequity in our workforce isn't just a social problem, but an economic one. You cite a study that found racial inequities account for $2.3 trillion in unrealized economic gains in just 2018 alone. Can you describe how we are limiting ourselves economically by not doing more to address racial inequity in the workforce? And how can WIOA better serve women and people of color?
Thank you, Representative Jones, for the very important question. So first, the study that you're referring to was developed by PolicyLink and with Burning Glass using our data. And it provides an in-depth analysis of disaggregated equity indicators in labor market dynamics. It found that white workers are 50% more likely than workers of color to hold good jobs, and that if you can eliminate those racial inequities in income, you would boost the U.S. economy again, as you cited, by $2.3 trillion a year. I think it's important, first of all, to recognize that there would be really a double gain there. Not only does that represent $2.3 trillion more in wages for workers of color, but it also says, in a free market economy, wages are a proxy for productivity. So not only would that $2.3 trillion gain to workers be a gain to workers, but it would also be a gain to industry for having a more productive workforce. So to your question, the mechanism for being able to bridge that gap, and I think this is why is skills. What's most exciting is that the opportunity here to bridge the gap is real, it's clear, and it's achievable. And the key here is to look at what are the jobs that are going unfilled. And there have been a number of representatives who have cited that there are a lot of employers who are unable to find talent for jobs. There are critical talent shortages throughout the economy in New York and every district. If we start there with the landscape of opportunity and then work backwards and say, okay, where are there talent pools that have high representation of people of color, of women, of immigrants, and how do we think about the specific skill pathways that will enable people in those talent pools with strong representation to move into better paying jobs with more upward mobility with lower rates of representation. The workforce system can be designed to help people bridge those gaps by specifically acquiring the skills for those particular transitions?
Thank you so much. Ms. Wu, since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have witnessed an historic number of displaced workers, particularly in communities of color. As my colleague from Washington, Ms. Jayapal, pointed out, reports show that women of color have been disproportionately affected. What kinds of resources and funding can employers like Microsoft bring to the table to ensure that when displaced workers return to the workforce, they are earning livable wages that allow them to support their families?
Thank you, Congressman. This is something I feel very passionately about. I actually started my career representing workers, a lot of steel workers, tobacco workers, hotel workers who had lost their jobs. And it is really tough on just the worker, not just the worker, but their whole family when this happens. Microsoft has partnered with nonprofits around the country to make sure that we're meeting people where they are, serving communities, diverse communities. We actually have a focused effort right now, especially working with Black and African American led and serving nonprofits, 50 nonprofits around the country, provide career services, counseling, skills education, opportunities to connect to jobs. And doing that, that's part of what private sector can do. We have to do it in partnership with government and others, community colleges, libraries, wherever people are, to meet people and to help them do the best match they can to try to find good jobs, as we talked about earlier, and also say, if you need a few more skills, here are some options. We're providing low and no cost training and certifications, but we know people do better when they have a partner to help them and support them. And so it's important to invest in those partnerships too.
Thank you so much. If you want to respond more to Mr. Representative Jones, you can do so in writing. Everyone is interested in what you're saying. Representative Letlow.
Members of the committee and witnesses, thank you for taking the time to discuss opportunities for dislocated workers under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. I'd like to highlight one workforce program that has benefited dislocated workers, as well as new entrants to the workforce in my district and state. The Department of Labor has partnered with Delta Regional Authority and the Appalachian Regional Commission to administer an initiative called the Workforce Opportunity for Rural Communities. This program has boosted rural community workforce development efforts across the state and within the 5th District. In fact, my alma mater and former employer, the University of Louisiana Monroe, was able to benefit from one of these grants. ULM partnered with numerous local parish school systems, community colleges, and workforce boards to create a high school business academy, which taught students the basics of entrepreneurship, management, marketing, and accounting, while allowing them to earn college credit. This partnership sought to align curriculum to regional needs. I hope Congress will continue to invest in the DOL Rural Community Workforce Program. Ms. Wu, you said that the most critical component of skilled programs is an immediate prospect to connect to good jobs. This seems to be a straightforward point, yet our workforce system often misses the opportunity to successfully partner with the business community. How can WOIA maximize employer engagement to ensure that workforce development priorities are closely aligned to regional economic development needs?
Thank you for the question. And it's exciting to hear about that partnership. I think, a couple things, as I said earlier, small and medium-sized businesses, especially the ones that rely on the workforce system, often are very stretched. They don't have a separate HR person. They don't have an internal training department. So working with them to really understand employers' needs, and as Dr. Fox and others referenced, there are some great incentives and financial supports out there in the system, but sometimes business owners are too busy to find out about them. And so I think it's very important for the workforce system to sort of go to where employers are, provide them that support and information, and help them upskill their current workforce. Talking about skating to where the puck is going, we want to skill all workers, of course, but helping, maybe being a little more flexible or providing more funds or programs for incumbent worker training, existing workers, so they can develop skills on the job. That will help businesses and workers too.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Wu, and to the other witnesses. I yield back my remaining time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And now Ms. Manning of North Carolina.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being with us and staying right through to the end.
I represent a district in North Carolina that lost thousands of jobs in the textile and furniture manufacturing industries in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And those were good jobs that workers could do with only a high school degree. Today, as we look at the manufacturing jobs we currently are getting, they are advanced manufacturing jobs. They require more skills than people can gain with just a high school diploma. And I know that we're going to see more technological change and more automation, and workers will need more skills if they have a shot at keeping their jobs. So, Mr. Barela, can you talk to us about how the public workforce development system can adapt to provide access to upskilling opportunities for workers so they can keep their jobs, rather than having a system that's reactive and intervenes only after workers are displaced?
Right, and I believe Assistant Secretary Wu mentioned incumbent worker training, and I think that's what workforce boards need to do with the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, but we need more opportunities that we can go and partner with our industry associations through sector initiatives, or even individual employers that could be small businesses, to work with those impacted workers who need to be upskilled to work alongside technology and not be displaced by technology, to keep those jobs in advanced manufacturing. So I do think we have the opportunity, but we need to enhance the funding available to do that, and also encourage workforce boards to use those resources in that way. So much of our performance measures are based on reactionary displaced workers, and we need to look at how we measure success working with impact to incumbent workers. The disruption that happened with COVID only exacerbated what we're going to have to look at, the disruption in other industries as automation becomes more prevalent, and as work is done by technology, but that technology needs human support. And so how do we do that? In Colorado, we are working with advanced manufacturers with our in-school high school students through our apprenticeship programs, starting them at their junior and senior year. They're learning on the job. It's complemented with not only curriculum in high school, but in community college. The third year, they work mostly and get trained on the job. And then they have a choice to make. Do I want to continue my education in formal structures, education, or do I stay employed and have the employer work with me with the career that I've had or earned while I was still in high school?
Great, thank you very much. And I have to say, I have spent time visiting both of the great community colleges in my district, and they are working with employers to make sure that the training they're offering is in areas that employers need workers, and they're also reaching into the high schools to make sure that they're getting training, getting high school kids interested, getting them summer internships or paid jobs while they're in high school, so they can also develop those skills or work toward those skills and then go on to the community colleges and continue to develop those skills. Mr. Sigelman, I'd like to ask you if you have comments along the same lines, and also what can the federal workforce system do to best meet the needs of the employers and workers?
Thank you, Representative Manning. I think a lot of this comes down to being able to start by understanding what employers need. And you mentioned some of the excellent work that's being done by North Carolina community colleges. We're very proud of our work with a number of community colleges in North Carolina and around the country in helping them to take a data-driven approach to understanding the landscape of opportunity for their communities. That's very important, because very often we find is that all too often we find is that workforce system, our continuing, our career and technical education system, our CTE system that is, and others are often misaligned in terms of how they are serving the landscape of demand and the landscape of opportunity. I'll give you an example. We recently did an analysis of the spending on CTE programs for the Excel and Ed Foundation. Post the Perkins Act reauthorization, there's billions of dollars flowing into CTE. It's an incredibly valuable resource in helping make sure that students can acquire industry recognized credentials. Unfortunately, what we found is that only 18% of the credentials that are being funded are actually in demand by employers. So that we start with opportunity first, use that as a key threshold to create standards for what kinds of training we fund, subject the ETPL community college programs to a standard of assessing lead to jobs that are locally in demand and lead to good wages and upward mobility, then we can really turn the corner.
Thanks
very much. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Manning. And now, Mr. Bowman, Vice Chair of the Education and Labor Committee. You're on.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. Ms. Wu, I had a question about digital literacy and upskilling. Thinking about employees who've been in the workplace for 10 to 15 years who now find themselves needing to upskill. Given Microsoft's work on many digital literacy training efforts, can you describe what the key components are for making digital literacy training effective for workers who may need to upskill after having been in the workforce for some time? What additional support, like childcare, is needed beyond the content of the training?
Thank you for that question. Well, as you know, from your background in education as well, people do need different kinds of supports to succeed. First of all, we know adults learn best in context, and work is a great motivating context. When people know they've got to get on that conference call for work to be there with their boss, they are going to learn those tools, or they need to take these orders so the business will survive and thrive. They are very motivated. So that's first of all, finding ways to help adults learn in context makes a big difference. Cohorts make a big difference. So people learning together with other peers, understanding, hey, I'm having this challenge. How are you working through this challenge? That's also very important. And mentorship. People have gone through the program already and saying, I had troubles there too, but actually this can make a big difference and you will get there. And a lot of our sort of community college partnerships, we find that people, we have to give people also an opportunity to fall down and get back up. And so they need those other supports. That's why working with the public systems is important, to provide transportation, maybe childcare, IT troubleshooting. My device at home is too old. I can't even log on to that course to get to it online. It's too slow or it's too old. What do I do? How can I access resources to get better broadband access, or to have some technical support to achieve what I want to?
Mm-hmm. Would you say that context and cohorts are also important as we think about high school education and even middle school education as well?
Absolutely. Microsoft has a longstanding TEALS program, which is basically teaching computer science in high school. We recognize that far too many students didn't even have a computer science class in their high school. And we've been expanding our effort in particular because we know for underserved populations, if they get a class in high school, they are 7 to 10 times more likely to pursue it in college. So you've got to start early. Absolutely agree. Our approach there has been focusing on supporting teachers to sort of train the trainer. So we teach teachers in local high schools who are already there, already have the relationships, already known to the students, and help students and teachers move forward together. But absolutely agree, at middle school and high school, we all need support, right? We all succeed better when we're part of a team. And so having those supports and encouragement and repeated exposure, it's not just a one time you're running across this, but you get to see technology opportunities, education, and people who look like you or are like you succeeding in technology fields is very important.
You make me very proud. When I was a middle school principal, we had one of the only computer science courses in New York City. And I have 2 former students. One is currently at MIT, the other's at Bronx Science, at Cornell after going to Bronx Science. And we were located right around the corner from a housing project and as a Title I school. And I just got a text today from a former student who's going to be going to North Carolina A&T. So yeah, computer science really matters. One quick question. What would you say to critics that argue workers cannot successfully make the transition or make the change?
I'm sorry, to say to critics that they can't do it?
Yes.
Well, I think everyone has the capacity to learn, right? We're human, and that is part of being human. If people aren't successfully able to transition over to other things, we need to look at, first of all, we have to give people options. We have to look at the skills they already have, as Mr. Sigelman also said, and not to say, what don't you have, but what skills and experience do you have, and how can we build on that? And what are your aptitudes? Not all technology is the same. There are lots of things that, it could be technology focused on energy and the environment. It could be in the helping professions, helping in healthcare. It could be counseling. It could be in gaming. So there are a lot of different opportunities across technology. And what we really need to do, I think, is open up that world, show people how technology is relevant to their lives and can help them advance and find what's a good fit for them.
Thank you so much. My time is running out. Sorry, Mr. Sigelman and everyone else. I really wanted to ask you all questions too, just not enough time. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. And now, Mr. Pecan of Wisconsin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to all the witnesses for being here today. I was struck by something that you said, Ms. Wu, about who sits at the table really matters, right? I think that's in so many aspects of life. And, one thing I haven't heard talked about a whole lot today are the role of unions, because as we know, apprenticeships, although Mr. Barela, you did mention registered apprenticeships in your initial remarks, are joint labor management cooperative processes. And so, Mr. Barela, if I can, first, please extend my greetings to your governor and to Marlon, please. They were good friends and appreciate them. But could you talk a little bit more about that registered apprenticeship experience? And then secondly, what more could we do to put unions at the table to help make these decisions? Because I just left 2 days ago, I was at the apprenticeship program here at the Painters and Allied Trades in Madison. We had Secretary Walsh here in town, and we had him out to see it. So if you could just talk a little more about that. I just haven't seen a whole lot of those conversations today.
Thank you for that question, Representative. And, part of our whole ecosystem is making sure that through our earn learn models, the apprenticeship programs are highlighted. And I think our unions with the skills trades, construction apprenticeships offer such an opportunity for people in high school, people that are recently graduated from high school, and even mid-career professionals to go into an opportunity to get into a relative career pathway that offers a wage while they're going through that process. We have the Bell Commission here in Colorado, which is our Business Experiential Learning Commission that was first created by Governor Hickenlooper and now Governor Polis. It takes the business community and really exposes them to not only the opportunity through the state departments here, Department of Education, Department of Higher Education, Department of Economic Development, International Trade, and the Department of Labor to figure out how we can make sure that people have pathways into industry that involve professional experience, education, and credentialing, and not just formalized academic credentials. And so our union apprenticeships and our merit-based apprenticeship programs sit at the table and discuss how we create opportunities for people to look at going into the apprenticeship field when they're young. But our average age of our apprenticeships when they join in Colorado is 27 years old. So we need to make sure that people, as they're I don't want to say floundering, but they want to look for better opportunities and livable wages in the communities. The apprenticeship systems, both unionized and merit-based apprenticeships here in Colorado, offer a great opportunity so that they don't have to stop earning and get a credential at the same time.
And let me ask you a quick follow-up to something kind of related, trade adjustment assistance. Can you talk a little more about that? Because in our area, I know that I still, even since I've been in Congress, I'm still watching companies go overseas or south of the border, and we're still having some workers who are displaced out of that. Can you talk a bit more about, no matter what the job loss is, how we can try to make trade adjustments assistance, what we could add to this bill in that area?
For Colorado, what a great question for us as we go through coal disruption and the closing of our coal plants and our coal mines. If we could look at the trade adjustment model to, in this particular case, the coal industry, and I think one of your previous colleagues asked about the fossil fuel industry. How do we take care of those workers who are probably in primary jobs in their communities and help with transitioning from those jobs into jobs in those communities that pay at or close to that rate? And so we could take the trade adjustment model and make sure that we look at them holistically. In Colorado, we're using state and some WOIA funds to do it now as we plan for that, but there are not a lot of resources to deal with those huge impacts that not only through the workers, but the tax revenue that those industries provide to the communities to support them is going to be something that we struggle with. Here it's the coal industry, but it's because of technology, the disruption will happen in many industries. And so we need to be prepared. What is the package that best serves not only the employer, but the worker and the community that's left behind from those disruptions?
Thank you. And Ms. Wu, since you brought up the comment about at the table, any thoughts on how we can help bring labor to the table to try to help improve in this area as well?
Well, I know that's an important place where labor's voice is heard is at the workforce boards. And, as technology is changing workplaces, it's important to hear what workers' perspective is there because they're the ones doing the job every day. They have a lot of insights about how technology can be used efficiently and well. And I think, it's important to bring everyone into the conversation and help workers see the opportunities for them as well as the concern and address the concerns they may have.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll yield back my 2 seconds.
Thank you, appreciate it. And now we'll go forward with Ms. Bonamici, the very patient Ms. Bonamici.
And thank you so much, Chair Wilson, Chair Scott, Ranking Member Fox, and thanks so much to our witnesses. Just to briefly follow up on that conversation we were having about the need for partnerships and meeting local demand. I have a great agriculture science example here in Northwest Oregon, where Yamhill Carlton High School students, typically FFA members, have classes in viticulture. It's probably the only vineyard in the country planted and managed by high school students. They can get credit at Chemeketa Community College and they're ready to work in the wine industry, which is a big part of the economy and part of the district I represent. So I want to move on and recognize that as we have in the comments today, that the economic consequences of COVID-19 and the pandemic have been kind of a stark reminder of the problems of consistently underfunding our nation's workforce system. We do not have adequate pathways now and supportive services for displaced workers to help them access quality upskilling and reskilling opportunities. And at the same time, entire sectors of our economy like manufacturing and energy are on the brink of significant transformation that will create new good paying jobs. In fact, I just am also in a science committee hearing with Secretary Granholm today talking about these workforce issues with the energy transition. So we need to make sure that those have been affected by structural changes in our economy have access to transition assistance programs, investments in workforce training and economic support, development support. So Mr. Barela, I appreciated your reference to Colorado's Just Transition Office. I'm currently working on a bill to establish a National Economic Transition Office, which is modeled on Colorado's efforts that will help scale up and target federal economic and workforce development assistance to communities and workers, beginning with the coal economy. So in my work on this legislation, I've heard from many in the workforce system about the strengths of the Trade Adjustment Assistance Program, which of course Mr. Pocan just mentioned, for training and income support. But Mr. Barela, should displaced workers receive different benefits based on the reason for their displacement? Or do we need a model that serves as a sort of universal dislocated worker program? And how can this committee expand WIOA benefits to serve more workers regardless of the cause of displacement?
Representative, great question, and thank you for that. I do think that it shouldn't matter the reason or the cause of displacement, but the package that's available to workers is robust enough so that there is for them to be successful transitioning in their communities. So many of what has happened is people realize that, I'm getting back power generation. If there's a job somewhere else, those workers are forced to move to where the job still exists rather than look at opportunities to stay in the community that they chose to live with in Colorado. So I think, you look at housing assistance, transportation assistance, support services, access to training, a lot of these unionized positions in the power generation, if they have to move into another category or program in the union, they have to start back at that apprentice level, and it could take 4 or 5 years to get back to the journeyman level, and it's just say power transmission. And so the wage, I don't want to say wage guarantee, but the wage replacement to keep them whole as they're upskilling and moving to that new opportunity would be a great opportunity that we just can't resource through the dislocated worker program. So when you look at how the disruption is going to happen through industry after industry because of technology, it'd be great to have a package that's universal to dislocated
Absolutely.
workers.
And I don't want to cut you off, but I want to get in another question. We also need to consider strategies that help workers avoid displacement before it occurs. So for example, here in Northwest Oregon, the Oregon Manufacturing Innovation Center, also known as OMIC, brings together industry leaders, Boeing, educational institutions, including Portland Community College, Oregon Institute of Technology, Oregon State, Portland State. Together, they're developing a registered apprenticeship program in advanced manufacturing. So, Mr. Barela, you talked about Colorado's efforts to secure more than 1,600 sector partnerships. So what are some of the best practices for sector partnerships that could be scaled at a national level or codified when we reauthorize WIOA, and how have they helped create career pathways in emerging industries to meet the needs of local businesses?
I think I'll highlight the healthcare industry and looking at how it's really dependent on industry and business partners coming together at the table, forgetting they may be competitors out in the real world, and figure out how they meet critical talent needs collectively as an industry, and getting them to the table and saying, here are the critical skill shortages, but also maybe the occupational shortage, and then making sure that our education pipeline system is hearing them and creating programs that can meet their needs. And that's not stagnant, that has to be agile, because we know those needs change very rapidly now. You know, they're not 5 and 10 years, they're 1 year and 2 year. And so that education pipeline system needs to be agile and listening to business and industry.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And my time has expired. I yield back. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I remind my colleagues and our chair of the committee, Dr. Fox, you ready? Chairman Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Barela, we've heard a lot. You've mentioned, I think, in your testimony about the possibility of counter-cyclical spending with Medicaid when poverty goes up, Medicaid spending goes up, SNAP benefits, unemployment benefits. When there's a recession, should workforce training benefits be also on a counter-cyclical basis?
Thank you, Chairman Scott. What a great question. We're so reactive in the Dislocated Worker Program and several of our Title I programs. It should be made available. I don't know. I think if there could be a trust fund like we have with the unemployment insurance system that's available for states, localities to take advantage of when there is a surprise and economic downturn that's acute, so that we have resources to serve and maybe prevent the dislocation. I do feel when people stay attached to employment, if it's through upskilling and reskilling and working with the employer, we're much better off. And so I do think it should be that funding formula needs to be looked at so that local workforce boards, state workforce councils have access to that funds when they need it, not waiting for the bulk of that resource to be seen 2 years out when you may not need it.
Yeah, we keep hearing that we're serving about 1/3 of the people that actually need assistance. Does that mean we're serving 1/3 of the people at the full cost of service, or we're serving everybody at about 1/3 of what we ought to be spending on each one?
Great question. You know, I think I mentioned in 2019, Colorado had about 77,000 people use the public workforce system. Only 7,000 of those individuals received intensive services or training or upskilling. The far majority of those are just getting career coaching and navigation. So we could do so much better to be responsive to the critical skill shortages we have if we could upskill people when they're dislocated or before they're dislocated. And so it's a very good question.
Thank you. Mr. Sigelman, the different skills are provided. The first step, I think, is getting on the vendors list to provide services. If you're on the vendors list, how does the program actually target the job training to where it's needed? If everybody wants to be a dental assistant, but the area needs welders, how do you how does that work? And
Representative Scott, I'm so glad you asked that question, because it's a critical and urgent problem right now with our eligible training provider list. In that, in most places, there are no defined standards for what qualifies as fundable training, and so there's often a political process of what sectors are able to shout the loudest. We need, and I think this is an opportunity for Congress to act in creating rigorous standards to make sure that the training that we fund aligns to jobs that are in demand, locally, because jobs that are maybe in demand in one part of the state may not be elsewhere, that they are also vetting that they're teaching the skills that differentiate people for those jobs. And that those are jobs which are good jobs that pay well and provide people with upward mobility from there.
Well, we thought that's what we were doing when we funded and had the local board and didn't tell them what to do. That I guess we need to do a little more work on that. But in terms of skills, how do what are called soft skills?
Mm-hmm.
How do they get? How do they fit into the program?
They're very important, and I think they need to be part of every kind of training program that we do. Just teaching somebody how to code or how to weld isn't enough to get them a job. In the 21st century economy, jobs blend skills. Our research shows the new foundational skills that are cross-cutting across most kinds of jobs in the 21st century economy. And they include not only technical skills, but also human skills like creativity and the ability to communicate. They include data skills and digital skills, as has been pointed out earlier in the hearing. And of course, also business skills. We're finding there's a certain business skills like project management, whether you're a nurse case manager or whether you're in construction or whether you're in IT. Those are sets of skills which are broadly needed. We need to make sure that students have the full package, and that our workforce training integrates those foundational skills alongside technical training.
Are people that provide those kinds of skills aren't generally found on the vendor lists?
I think the vendor lists have a very wide array of providers. Some of them are doing really excellent work.
I mean, if you have a provider of soft skills, is it likely that they could be providing those services in the community?
I'm sure they're provided. I would want to make sure that those soft skills are being provided alongside hard skills. If somebody just takes a course in communications, but they still don't have the technical skills, it's going to be tricky. The 21st century economy, industry needs of both and. It's as valuable as foundational skills are, people also need to be able to have the technical skills that enable them to be productive on the job on day one.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Representative Mervin.
Thank you, Chairwoman. First, I'd like to extend my thanks to Chairwoman Wilson and Ranking Member Murphy for allowing me to participate in today's hearing as a non-subcommittee member. I would also like to extend my thanks to subcommittee and its staff for recognizing the workforce development initiatives taken in the state of Indiana and providing the opportunity for Mr. McGrew to testify today. As a representative from Indiana's 1st Congressional District, I am proud that Indiana, with the leadership of Governor Holcomb and Mr. McGrew, have demonstrated the incredible value of innovative and effective workforce development programs with proven results. As we toward the end of the hearing, I want to ask Mr. McGrew, are there any other successful Indiana actions you would like to highlight? And if not already discussed, what federal actions can be taken to support your initiatives and to allow other states to follow your example?
Thank you, Representative Mervan. I think one of the things that we continue to try to do is connect employers to talent. And that has been one thing that has come up time and time again today, is how we're going about doing those things. I previously mentioned the UI data project that we're working on to provide direct targeted information to our UI claimants on educational opportunities and as well as job opportunities that their needs. And today we're also launching an employer connector tool for our career and tech ed program. The Workforce Board Cabinet also serves as the state's eligible Perkins recipient. So we direct all of the career and technical education activity throughout the state. And so we provide opportunities for our high school students to opt in to sharing their contact information with employers. And so we're using that information that we have to get that out and push that directly to our employer community. So we think that'll help alleviate some of those issues that employers are dealing with, especially as we come into better alignment for our CTE programs with our local labor market needs. So we're very excited about that. I'd also say looking outside of government for work and activity that's being done. I serve on our State Chamber of Commerce's new Institute for Workforce Excellence Board. And they are working to identify not only state and federal resources that are available to employers to work on talent attraction, talent development, talent recruitment, but also what is happening at a local level. So whether or not local chambers have programs or community foundations have programs. So I think looking outside of the system for supports is another way that we can really leverage things and work better together.
I thank you very much. And my follow-up question is, coming from the first district, obviously labor is extremely important, also labor unions. But my question is, what is the state of Indiana, and any of you might want to add to this, on manufacturing and making sure we bring workers along to the next generation of manufacturing and the renewable energies? Exactly, if we could just have your view of that, Mr. McGrew, what we're doing in Indiana.
Yeah, so I think one exciting opportunity that we have is our smart manufacturing grants that we're providing employers to help transition to new technologies. With that comes obviously the reskilling and upskilling of incumbent workers to meet those new technological needs. So I think with our employer training grant and the fact that it can be used for incumbent workers, provided there is a wage gain that the employee sees is important. But I also think redesigning and using employers to really look at our community college system and our high school career and tech ed system to make sure that we have the skills that are going to be needed once those graduates complete the program in 2 or 3 years, really fit with where technology is going.
Thank you very much. And I thank the subcommittee. And at this time, I'd like to yield back my time.
Thank you. Thank you for visiting us today. Pleasure. I don't believe we have any other members questioning. Okay. I remind my colleagues that pursuant to committee practice, materials for submission for the hearing record must be submitted to the committee clerk within 14 days following the last day of the hearing. So by close of business on June 10th, 2021, preferably in Microsoft Word format, the material submitted must address the subject matter of the hearing. Only a member of the subcommittee or an invited witness may submit materials for inclusion in the hearing record. Documents are limited to 50 pages each. Documents longer than 50 pages will be incorporated into the record by way of an internet link that you must provide to the committee clerk within the required time frame. But please recognize that in the future, that link may no longer work. Pursuant to House rules and regulations, items for the record should be submitted to the clerk electronically by emailing submission to edandlabor.hearings@mail.house.gov. Again, I want to thank these amazing witnesses for their participation today. Great information. You have given us a path forward, and we thank you. Members of the subcommittee may have additional questions for you, and we ask the witnesses to please respond to those questions in writing. The hearing record will be open for 14 days in order to receive those responses. I remind my colleagues that pursuant to committee practice, witness questions for the hearing record must be submitted to the majority committee staff or committee clerk within 7 days. The questions submitted must address the subject matter of the hearing. I now recognize the distinguished member of the full committee for a closing statement. Dr. Fox.
Thank you, Chair Wilson. I appreciate that very much. And again, I thank the witnesses for sharing their perspectives on how our workforce system can be better prepared for the 21st century skills-based economy. I know that most of the other members have left the hearing, and that's fine with me because I want to make a little speech that they've all heard before. And I apologize to the chairwoman and to the chair of the committee. We've invested billions of dollars from hardworking taxpayers into the workforce system, but it's clear that the system is not effectively meeting the needs of workers or employers across the country, leading to a vast and growing skills gap and the situation that we have described today. And I want to bring up something particularly to our panel members, that I think leads to this and leads to it significantly. I read your testimony, all of your testimonies, yesterday and last evening, and over in your testimony and today, you have used what I call the T word, training. I believe that a big part of the problem that we have in our country is the fact that we have segregated and divided our workforce into two different groups. And I listened very carefully today to your comments. I noted at no point did we talk about people with baccalaureate degrees who may be out of work and who may need upskilling or reskilling. You know, I'm an English major. I was an English major, went on and got 2 degrees beyond that. But probably if I weren't in the Congress, I might need upskilling, particularly in the use of computers, but we didn't talk about that. So what we've been talking about primarily today are the 70% of the people who don't have baccalaureate degrees. And I think that you've contradicted yourself in several places. And I don't mean this to be critical. I want to raise your awareness. You keep talking about training, but Mr. Sigelman, you particularly said we need people who have human skills. We need people who can blend skills. We need people with project management skills. Well, the only thing I remember from my doctoral program is that you train dogs and you educate people. And I think that what we've so much talked about today is having people learn specific kinds of skills that aren't necessarily ability to be upskilled or to be reskilled, because we're not talking about the kind of things that will help them learn over and over and over again. And so I'm very, very concerned about that. And I would like to urge you all to look at all of your literature and say, should we be talking about education? Where we think with education, certainly I think all of us feel that way, we are helping the whole person learn and learn throughout their lives. I'm a big believer in continuing education and lifelong learning. So I really want to urge you to do that because I think it's a great issue. I want to associate myself also with the comments that Chairman Scott made in his comments, where he talked about how we tried in WIOA to give a lot of local control. And yet, I think again, Mr. Sigelman, you talked about the fact that you find in so many cases, people are not offering the skills that are needed for the 21st century jobs, but what's available now. So I think we have to look very carefully, and I don't think we got enough feedback on this today, on how do we balance accountability with local control. We push local control a lot, but we have to have accountability or we're pouring money down a rat hole. And we would be seeing better results in terms of where our workforce is now if we were able to balance those two things, I think, better. And I do appreciate the fact that we've talked about removing obstacles. I think we have to do that. We have to use all the tools at our disposal. I did notice some of the witnesses jotting down the $5,250 tax deduction for the private sector, which made me believe that not everybody on all the witnesses understood that or understood the $5,250 that can be used. And I think it's very important that we do that. I think this was a great conversation today. It brought out a lot of issues that I think we need to be dealing with as we look to the reauthorization. I think we have a lot better understanding of what the needs are going to be in the 21st century. But I do urge us to, we ourselves on the committee, and those of you out there doing the work that you're doing, to rethink how you talk about these things, because if we want to get people to stay in the education system, which is what it is, or come back into the education system, whether they left at the end of high school or after some community college or even after a baccalaureate degree or even after a master's degree, we've got to talk about treating these people with dignity. And I don't think we talk about dignity when you talk about training. That's my point. If you understand that, we want to talk about education and workforce development. And I think that's so important. So I want to urge you to do that. And again, I want to thank the chairwoman and the chairman of the committee for helping put together a good bipartisan panel today and hearing. And with that, Madam Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Fox. I now recognize myself for the purpose of making my closing statement. Thank you again to our witnesses for your testimony and for guiding today's discussion on the need to help workers recover from displacement, navigate future changes in employment, and access lifelong learning opportunities. Today, we affirmed WOIA's proven track record of supporting workers who have lost their jobs, whether it's due to automation, climate change, or global pandemic. These programs are among the best tools that we have to ensure that displaced workers can get the skills and support they need to build more rewarding careers. This bipartisan reauthorization is an opportunity for Congress to realize the full potential of WOIA's program for both workers and employers. That means addressing the current underfunding of training programs, including individual training accounts, and it means making the serious investment in workforce development that our competitors in other industrialized economies have made for decades. It means ensuring the workforce system has the necessary data to help workers leverage the skills they already have so that programs can serve people more rapidly, less expensively, and with greater long-term success. It also means expanding comprehensive support to help dislocated workers find new and rewarding career pathways, even beyond the pandemic. Most important, it means prioritizing investments in lifelong learning and career support so that workers can avoid being displaced without the skills required to transition to better jobs. I look forward to working with my colleagues on this committee to pass a WIOA reauthorization that not only helps workers recover from displacement, but also prepares them to thrive in a changing economy for years to come. If there's no further business before this committee, without objection, this subcommittee stands adjourned.